Hello and welcome to Insurance in Canada. I'm your host, Rick Pedeta. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. We're looking at three stories. The first story we're looking at today, commercial rates continue to soften in the second quarter of 2025. Our second story, we're looking at a story from Florida about a payout that Tesla has been ordered by the courts to pay due to an automobile accident in Florida. And our last story today, Alberta making changes to their vehicle registration system in an effort to continue combating automobile theft. So without further ado, let's take a look at insurance in the news. So our first story today, we take a look at commercial rates and how they've been continuing their soft decline. Commercial rates we've entered a soft market starting last year, we noticed, and that has continued on into the first two quarters of 2025. So let's take a look at what the latest news is on that. Rate decline continues in Canadian commercial lines. Softening in the Canadian commercial insurance market continues, with commercial rates falling 4% on average in the second quarter of 2012 compared to the previous year, according to Marsh McLennan's latest Global Insurance Market Index. This is the sixth consecutive quarterly decrease in Canada and follows a 3% decline in 2025 Q1, Marsh said in the Thursday press release. Increasing insurer competition, including from new entrants, is currently the main catalyst behind rising market capacity, more favorable rates, and broader coverage options. So this, once again, we're talking about commercial insurance rates. We're not talking about personal insurance. As we all know, personal insurance, unfortunately, both on the property side, auto side, continues their slow increase. But on the commercial line side, no, because more markets have decided to compete more for the business on commercial line side. That's where we're seeing that decline in those particular rates. And keep in mind, you're not going to see it in every segment of commercial insurance. So certain segments you will. Other segments, for instance, in the realty market, if you own a rental property, you may not see those same decreases that you see in other segments of commercial insurance, just because that particular segment of commercial lines, especially when it comes to rented dwellings, duplexes, rented triplexes, it's still not a profitable line of business. So, like I said, this is a general decrease, but you're not necessarily going to see it in all lines, and you may not see it if you have a commercial policy on your particular policy. Like I said, it's going to depend on still many other factors besides just a general decrease. Getting back to the article, Marsh Canada Insurance Market Rates reports found rates dropping in all major product lines. Commercial property insurance rates saw the biggest decline at 6%, reflecting an increasingly competitive market that has led to improved terms for some clients, including notable decreases in sublimits and coverage enhancements. Key discussion points include tariff impacts, valuation methods, and wildfire risks. The report says financial implications of tariffs may impact industries such as automotive, steel, and aluminum, necessitating thorough examination of supply chain exposures. As an indication of market competitiveness, insurers exposed to significant natural catastrophes with poor claims experience or that presented engineering concern also experienced rate reductions due to increased insurer competition. Canadian casualty insurance rates decreased 2%, the eighth consecutive quarter of declines. However, complex risks, especially in heavy industrial and energy sectors and those with significant U.S. and transportation exposure, typically experience rate increases. And that's not a surprise. Any Canadian business that has any sort of U.S. exposure, supplies any clients in the U.S., sells their product to American customers directly. Yeah, you're always going to find issues trying to find insurance or find affordable insurance anyways for your particular line of business, just because the U.S. is a very litigious society, as we're going to see in our next stories. So yeah, once again, you're still going to find issues trying to get uh, not necessarily covers for itself, but something that you might consider reasonable, but the insurance industry does not. Canadian casualty insurance rates decreased 2% eighth consecutive quarter. Sorry, we already spoke about that. As well as an influx of new managing general agents in domestic London and Bermuda markets, adding capacity primarily in excess layers, the report says. Exclusions for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances were common. The report says insurers expected organizations with known exposures to show commitment to reducing usage and have a replacement plan. So, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, those are substances that were used, for instance, in non-stick coatings. So certain chemicals that were using these substances, some of them were calling them forever chemicals. The industry has become worried about claims occurring far in the future when it comes to the use of these substances, the lack of long-term studies into possible interactions with human physiology when it comes to these substances. So, yeah, the industry has gone ahead and excluded claims from using these sort of substances to get ahead of potential liability exposures in the future. So it's no surprise there. So that's something that's pretty recent, probably in the last, I don't know, 6-7 years that you've seen these exclusions, but they're now the commonplace across the board when it comes to commercial policies. Back to the article, as the industry continues to grapple with increasingly complex losses, the role of the technical adjuster has never been more critical or more at risk. Oh, sorry, that's a separate article. Sorry. So yeah, that's the gist of the article when it comes to commercial insurance, which is always good to see some area of insurance trying to the rates decreasing somewhat. Commercial insurance is always a tricky branch to be a broker in, just because of the cyclical nature of how the insurance company's appetites when it comes to certain types of risk ebb and wane, like the phases of the moon. So yes, we're in a soft market now. Hopefully that'll continue for how long, who knows. But it'd be nice to see it in other areas of the commercial lines, realty, for instance, hospitality, restaurants being another area that's always going to be tricky to try and find coverage for, regardless of how the market is responding in general. Moving on to our next story. This one is out of Florida. I usually try and keep my stories Canadian-based, but every now and then I like to bring in a story from international just to show what's going on, especially on the claims side, especially down in the States because of their proximity to us. It's always good to keep an eye on what's going on down there, especially when it comes to claims, because you never know when this sort of incident might happen here, and lawyers in Canada try and use the same rationale to try and not secure the exact same damages that what they're seeing in the States, but something similar, proportional anyways. And this is quite a claim scenario that had my head scratching as to what honestly, the court's reasoning when it comes to these astronomical payouts. But Tesla must pay $243 million over fatal autopilot crash. Tesla Inc. was told to pay $243 million in a lawsuit over a 2019 autopilot crash in Florida that killed a young woman and seriously injured her boyfriend, the first significant court loss for the automaker in litigation related to its driver assistance technology. A jury in Miami federal court found Friday that Tesla was 33% to blame for the collision. And this article is from August 4th, 2025. So when it says the court found Friday, which means that's last Friday, said that Tesla was 33% to blame for the collision. A Tesla Model S ran a stop sign at a T intersection in the Florida Keys and rammed into a couple's parked Chevrolet Tahoe while they were standing next to it. Jurors issued their verdicts left after less than a day of deliberations following a 3-week trial, the jury determined that the Tesla S driver was primarily responsible for the crash and that Tesla should pay $42.5 million to compensate the victims for their losses. The panel also ordered Tesla to pay $200 million in punitive damages, but the company said it expects that figure to be reduced by the court. Okay. That's kind of odd that the jury determined that the Tesla driver was primarily responsible, but Tesla should be the one to pay out the $242.5 million. Back to the article, Tesla had argued that the driver was entirely at fault because he was distracted when he dropped his mobile phone on the floorboard. Okay, today's verdict is wrong and only works to set back automotive safety and jeopardize Tesla's and the entire industry's effort to develop and implement life-saving technologies, Tesla said in a statement. We plan to appeal given the substantial errors of the law and irregularities at trial. Let's see if we can get back to the verdict itself. At trial, the jury heard testimony from the driver of the Model S, family members of the woman who died, company engineers, and various outside experts who discussed whether Autopilot played a role in the collision. George McGee, the driver of the Model S, had engaged the vehicle's driver assistance system while traveling from home to work. In the moments before the collision, data obtained from the vehicle showed that he had pressed the accelerator to 17 miles or 27 kilometers per hour over the posted speed limit, leading him to override the vehicle's adaptive cruise control before he went off the road. McGee testified that he had been on hold with American Airlines trying to modify an upcoming flight. He said his phone fell and he was looking for it before the crash. As his car left the road, McGee said he felt the texture of the road change under his tires and remembered jamming on the brakes. During questioning, he told jurors that he knew he was completely responsible operating the car, but that he expected Autopilot to assist him in the event he made a mistake. Wow, okay. This is a very odd case in my opinion, and for any driver to say, yeah, it was my mistake, but it's the vehicle's fault. No, sorry, in my opinion, this person should not be driving. I mean, revoke this person's license. It's just, I wouldn't say a comedy of errors, but this is quite unbelievable that the driver would undertake all these actions that were, by anybody's judgment, would be dangerous to say the least. Never mind just mindlessly pressing the accelerator while looking for your phone while you're driving. And somehow the jury believed that the vehicle is at fault. The vehicle manufacturer is the one who's at fault in this accident, when it seems that the driver is the one that had complete control over this situation. It's just, I don't know. It's just baffling why you would expect what do you expect the vehicle to do in this particular situation? Yes, I'm aware that the vehicle has this autopilot feature that can take over driving functions. However, if you're going to press the accelerator and override the autopilot, I don't know what you expect the vehicle to do. So this is why I'm scratching my head. Coming from a product liability insurance aspect, how exactly can any insurance company try and gauge, what the actual risk exposure when courts are interpreting the actions of the driver will no longer be important at all, that now it's just following to the vehicle itself. Yes, modern vehicles do have all these safety features. I'm kind of surprised that the most vehicles, and especially Teslas, would have automatic emergency braking systems. So I'm not exactly sure if it's because the driver's foot was on the accelerator that the automatic emergency braking might have been overridden. I don't know. I'm not an expert when it comes to the this sort of system, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around this whole situation and how it can fall to the vehicle manufacturer. Back to the article drink question. No. Back to the article. In that case, I do feel like it failed me. The, McGee said, according to a transcript of his testimony, the family of Nabil Benavides Leon, the woman who was killed, reached a confidential settlement with McGee in 2021 in a separate lawsuit. Lawyers for the estate of Benavides Leon and her boyfriend Dylan Angulo argued Tesla's autopilot encourages complacency and that the company and Musk have overstated the system's capabilities, leading drivers to be overconfident in its abilities. I don't know if you, please, in the comments, let me know, do you think this is the fault of the autopilot system, or is this all on the driver because he was overriding the autopilot when it comes to uh, pressing the accelerator? I don't own a Tesla myself, so if there's any Tesla owners out there who will let me know if the autopilot disengages if you press the accelerator or take over any of the driving aspects. They also allege that Tesla failed to add safeguards to ensure the software was only available on roadways where it was designed to be used, and features to monitor the attentiveness of drivers. Today's verdict represents justice for Nabil's tragic death and Dylan's lifelong injuries, holding Tesla and Musk accountable. I'm kind of odd that they say Tesla and Musk accountable for propping up the company's trillion-dollar valuation with self-driving hype at the expense of human lives. Brett Schreiber, a lead attorney for the crash victims, said in a statement, Tesla, as it has in other cases, blamed driver error for the collision, which I don't see why they wouldn't in this case. Lawyers for the company argued repeatedly that McGee was an aggressive driver with a history of speeding, and he took his eyes off the road and his hands off the wheel despite warnings in the owner's manual that drivers must stay engaged. And that's just, you think it was just common sense at this point. But it's got to be in the manual, I suppose. The company has maintained there were no defects in the software and that the autopilot operated exactly as designed throughout the trial. Tesla defense attorney Joel Smith said no driver assistance technology in the market in 2019 would have been able to prevent the crash. The automotive industry categorizes automation systems in the vehicles from level 0 to 5. Based on what features available, level 0 features simply pass on information to the drivers, like sounding a warning when you're driving out in traffic. Tesla's autopilot is classified as level 2 because it requires constant driver input and supervision. Level 5 is kind of the holy grail of autonomous vehicles, where the vehicle is driving itself completely and there's no steering wheel whatsoever, so there's no way for anybody in the vehicle to drive the vehicle itself. So we are not anywhere close to level 5 at this point. I always were kind of wary when it comes to how much automation was in vehicles these days. I think maybe we're pushing it a little too fast when it comes to implementing this technology in vehicles. I don't think drivers are getting a time to really become accustomed to this technology. Maybe it's being introduced a little too quickly, especially the autopilot feature with Tesla, where it it now drives itself. Most vehicles, if you have adaptive cruise control, your hands still have to be on the steering wheel. I know my vehicle, my Ford, has adaptive cruise control, but it has to, just, it still has to be somebody at the wheel and attentive. So, but in this particular case, like I said, I find it odd that with all the actions of the driver that they took, that the courts would still find Tesla to be that, 33% to blame for the collision and 242 million, $250 million. This justified $250 million, and only being 33% to blame. If they were 100% to blame, that means what? It's $1 billion. That I don't know. It's, in my opinion. Let me know what you think. I know like I said, down the States, they are a very litigious society. Uh, Awards given out by courts. It's quite incredible what they run to, but there has to be some restraint, some uh, point where rationality has to take over when it comes to uh, deciding who's at fault in these accidents and what the just reward would be for uh, compensating the victims of these accidents. And our last article comes from Alberta. We've talked about Alberta in previous episodes and the vehicle theft situation when it comes to Alberta being problematic. We talked about in previous episodes how auto thefts have been decreasing in most parts of Canada, especially in Quebec and Ontario. Alberta, there have seen decreases, but not as much as other parts of Canada. So this particular change to the vehicle registration system can hopefully help with that. How planned registration upgrades can trim Alberta auto theft. Insurance Bureau of Canada recommends a series of mitigation measures for Alberta to undertake to reduce theft and claim rates. First on that list is the removal of a VIN override in the province's vehicle registration system. There has been a steep jump in Alberta auto theft claims, up 65% over the past 3 years, finds a new IBC report. Large cities have been hit hardest, and insurance claims related to auto theft reached 110.3 million in 2024 compared to 67 million in 2021. That's a big steep increase. Processes to change an automobile's vehicle registration number, VIN, that's vehicle identification number, have long been used to fraudulently register stolen vehicles, and recent improvements in VIN forgery techniques used by criminals to make it difficult for car buyers or motor vehicle registries to spot fakes. The VIN override button used to be more of a problem back when the bad actors were not capable of generating a VIN that appeared legitimate. Sid Kingma, Equite Association's Director of Investigative Services for Western Canada, tells CU. And we've talked about Equite Association in previous episodes. That is the organization that spearheads fraud investigation in the insurance industry across Canada. Now the bad actors are much better at creating a fictitious VIN that can fool the system. The override function at the registries is not utilized as much as it once was. But what is a VIN override, and why would a person behind a motor vehicle registration counter be able to work around the system? For starters, it's nothing nefarious, says Tim Morrison, IBC's Director of Government Relations for the Western region. As the industry the VIN override was necessary for certain circumstances, like classic cars. You plug in a VIN from whatever year, the 1960s, and it was a different than number and letter sequences used today. You need the override to register the vehicle. So the VIN, the vehicle identification number, today it's a series of 17 letters and numbers. Each letter, each position represents something different. The vehicle manufacturer, where the vehicle was made, the year of the vehicle, make, model, and the last 6 normally represent the specific number to identify that particular vehicle that was produced. The 17-digit standard VIN came in effect, I believe it was 1984. Before 1984, it was a hodgepodge of different systems used by different manufacturers to create a serial number for a particular vehicle. But like I said, 1984, it was standardized to 17 digits. And so if you have a vehicle that was produced before 1984, the serial number is going to look different. And VIN decoding software won't be able to identify what the vehicle is based on the VIN from a vehicle before 1984. After 1984 and afterwards, yes. Just based, if you input the 17-digit VIN for a particular vehicle, and this is more for private passenger vehicles, pickup trucks, big commercial vehicles, the VIN decoder may not be able to identify the particular vehicle because a lot of vehicles are just sold as chassis and the body is put on by aftermarket companies. So But for most private passenger vehicles, yeah, a VIN decoder can tell you exactly what the vehicle is represented by that VIN, but it can't do it with a VIN before 1984 because it's not standardized. So yeah, the VIN override in any ministries, provincial ministries registration system, it does have a use because we still have those vehicles built before 1984 that do not have that standard VIN that the VIN decoder is not going to be able to identify. So that's what that particular part of the article is trying to state is yes, there is a reason why this particular function exists. Alberta's motor vehicle branch offices were privatized in 1993, according to a spokesperson at the Office of Ministry for Infrastructure. Plus, notes Morrison, auto theft has become more of a mission-critical issue in the province over the past 5 years, and you can say the same thing for other provinces and territories as well. But now it's solidly on the radar, and Morrison says IBC is working with Alberta's government to flag issues. He said the province is aware of the need to ensure the vehicle registration system doesn't exacerbate the theft problem. Auto theft has become a bigger problem, not just for insurers, but for consumers and governments. And now governments are taking a closer look at some of these loopholes that exist, and we're certainly happy to work with them and point them out. The criminals will find these holes and exploit them. The current motor vehicles registry system, known as MOVES, M-O-V-E-S, was created nearly 40 years ago, and despite many upgrades, it's nearing the end of life. That is why Alberta's government has embarked on a modernization of the system. The roadmap for the modernization envisions a full replacement of the current MOVES system with Arizona's MAX solution through an innovative code sharing agreement. So, like I said, there's a reason why you should always keep an eye on what's going on in other jurisdictions outside Canada, because you never know when those particular information, as like Arizona's MAX system, will pop up here. So as we modernize our system, we will be exploring options to make improvements to all processes, including vehicle identification number overrides. So yeah, VIN overrides, that's definitely something that should be reserved either for a certain section of the Ministry of Transportation for a particular province, or require some higher level clearance, higher level position to override and not make that available to lower rung employees, just because that's the kind of situation where you run into scams, run into collusion between those employees and people trying to pass off these vehicles as real vehicles when they're not, or vehicles that were stolen, trying to register them to new people after the vehicle was stolen, either in Alberta or in different jurisdictions in Canada and the US, and then brought into Alberta in order to re-register those vehicles in Alberta. So good to see that Alberta's government is trying to close these loopholes and make it more difficult for vehicle thieves to get away with this sort of thing. And that is it for me for today. I want to thank you for joining me. If you like what you see here today, please like and subscribe for more. Don't forget to follow Insurance in Canada on X/Twitter. I've also started uploading the episodes as audio podcasts on Spotify, so if you want to check that out, I appreciate that. And until next time, bye-bye.